war on Iran. He said in this speech that he is open, in his words, to a real deal with Iran. Was the president signaling serious openness to new negotiations on a deal to replace the one the Obama administration negotiated? That seemed to be what he was saying.
He said, and I'm quoting him now because I wrote it down, he said the United States is, quote, ready to make a real deal with Iran. This a day after that very all-caps tweet that he posted warning the Iranian leader Rouhani that if he goes ahead and continues to make threats against the United States, they will pay a price, and I'm paraphrasing like right now, like the world has never seen before.
Absolutely, and a threat really that at the end of the day is somewhat empty because it's our reporting that there are no serious military options on the table for the president now. I mean, certainly the U.S. has military options to attack Iran, but not ones under serious consideration right now. So that turn, perhaps it's classic Trump, right? That you seek to negotiate from a position of strength, so you make the threat as he did to North Korea, right? Weeks before he was willing to sit down with the North Korean leader. But this is quite a fast turn on a dime, even for this president.
Yeah, but in some ways, in the spirit of this speech, right, about all the deals he has made and all the deals he is going to make, right? He had this whole riff about tariffs and how he's going to be strong, and all of these countries have ripped Americans off, but he's in the middle of making a really good deal. What was striking about his talk about tariffs and trade is he's essentially, I think, feeling the heat around this. He's seemingly to recognize that people are nervous about this. Farmers all across the country, governors, Republican governors, complaining about some of the fallout of it. So he was telling people there, sit tight, something good is going to happen. At some point, it's not clear whether or not people are going to believe him or are going to experience that, or experience the real downside of tariffs and see it in real time on their farms, their car companies, in all sorts of ways throughout the country.
And all of a sudden, Navy Stoddard, he's pushing what, for a $12 billion subsidy to farmers, to the agriculture industry in the United States, because they're suffering right now as a result of this trade war that has developed.
Yeah, Nia's right. It's a bad day for the trade war. The president, we've never seen him with this sort of palpable level of discomfort where he's saying, just please stay with me on this. And it's because Speaker Ryan said something today against it. It's because the Republican Party is not the party of subsidies and bailouts. These farmers, both parties agree, want to sell their crop and their products. They don't want a bailout. And it's an acknowledgement, the fact that it's being prepared with government spending that no one wants to spend in either party, that the farmers are hurting as a result of these tariffs. So he's really in a corner increasingly on this issue. What's also interesting is that he spoke about Afghanistan, but not a hot active war, which is our presence in Syria. He actually made, in the 2 hours of mystery behind closed doors with Vladimir Putin, which he wants to distract the conversation from, and he wants to talk about revoking security clearances for Obama administration officials instead. What did happen, the Russians are reporting, is that there is a deal between the Israelis and the Russians that he is signing on to for some kind of moves in Syria that are very complicated and do involve the Iranians. And we need to know what that is. And that's something he should have been speaking to these veterans about. But he was noticeably quiet on that today.
Let me play a clip. This is the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, speaking at the same time as the president speaking. He's been meeting with Australian officials, and he spoke about Iran and the threat that the United States sees from Iran and the U.S. reaction. Listen to this.
I've spoken to the president about the meeting that he held with President Putin, and I was part of a larger discussion as well. I've spoken to to Foreign Minister Lavrov following that, and the president's been clear about some of the things that were agreed to. We're going to begin to put together a business council. There'll be places we'll start track two processes. There were many things that came from what I view as an incredibly important meeting between President Trump and President Putin, one that I think the world will have benefited from when history is written. I am looking forward to testifying tomorrow. We'll testify about a lot of things, including the relationship between the United States and Russia. But I think one of the things that gets lost is the determination that this administration has had in pushing back against Russian malign behavior around the world. It is unequaled in the history of the United States in terms of when there was a post-Cold War conflict between the United States and Russia, how firm this administration has been in pushing back against those threats.
Yeah, the clip did not address Iran, but it did address the whole Russia issue.
It does. And listen, here's the thing, though. that position, that's the administration position. No one's been tougher than us and trust us. And there is some substance to back the position that they've taken hard moves. I mean, the one they will often cite is providing lethal weapons to Ukrainian forces on the ground, a step that the Obama administration did not take. But let's ask this question. If the, one thing that is clear is that even Republicans, even members of the president's own party, do not have confidence in this administration's stance on Russia. And that's why you have someone like Lindsey Graham sponsoring a bipartisan bill, again, as Congress has already done, to pass new sanctions on Russia that the president cannot overrule. In effect, tie his hands because they clearly don't trust him. And it's interesting, if you look at the Graham-Menendez proposal here, they also require Senate approval requiring for U.S. withdrawal from NATO. They wouldn't put that in legislation if they weren't concerned about the president's public comments about NATO, which at least our NATO allies say weakens the U.S. and the West's position towards Russia. So we know what Mike Pompeo will say, we know what the president will say. We've been tougher than anyone, but even Republicans don't trust their position.
The fact that Lindsey Graham and Bob Menendez, a Republican and a Democrat, working together to impose tough new sanctions against Russia is very, very significant indeed. Everybody stand by. There's other breaking news we're following here on CNN. Ivanka Trump is shutting down her fashion company. We have new information. You're going to hear what she's saying about that. We have that and a lot more right after this. Viewers, Ivanka Trump, the president's daughter and a senior advisor over at the White House, has decided she will wind down her fashion company so she can pursue a career in public policy. Our Christina Alessi is joining us right now. You've been following the late-breaking developments. I understand she's put out a formal statement, Christina.
That's right, Wolf, and I just got a call from a source who told me that Ivanka Trump is going to address the staff of her company later this afternoon. Look, at the end of the day, this was a brand that really faced a lot of criticism for many, many reasons. But sources close to the decision tell me that this was driven by her desire to stay in public policy, to stay in Washington, D.C., and that the company had to operate under restrictions and limitations because of her role in the White House, and that it didn't make sense to keep the company operating under those restrictions if she wasn't going to return eventually. But that said, we can't ignore that this brand has been criticized. She's been criticized for keeping ownership of the company while also serving as a White House advisor, raising all kinds of questions about potential conflicts of interest and how she would address them. The brand has also been a target for critics of the Trump administration and its policies. There was a boycott one women's group started after the Access Hollywood tape became public, calling on people to boycott Ivanka Trump goods, which were, by the way, targeted towards female empowerment, and that was the message behind the brand. A lot of feminists saw that as sort of a hypocrisy, and that is just a few things that the brand was criticized for. And so now we see Ivanka deciding to shut it down. Look, it's unclear whether or not all of this criticism, all of this scrutiny affected the bottom line of the brand, because it is a public company. It does not release financial statements on a regular basis. All we can see is that on Ivanka Trump's financial disclosure form, that there was some payments coming from her company to Ivanka Trump personally. So you can assume that there was some profit coming out of the company, Wolf.
Christina, thank you very much for that. We'll continue to follow that story as well. Other news, the president with his latest spin on Russia interfering in the U.S. election, tweeting this just a little while ago. I'm quoting him now. I'm very concerned that Russia will be fighting very hard to have an impact on the upcoming election based on the fact that no president has been tougher on Russia than me. They will be pushing very hard for the Democrats. They definitely don't want Trump, close quote. That's simply clearly not true. The U.S. intelligence community has concluded that the Russian leader Putin was trying to help Donald Trump when he meddled in the 2016 election, something the Senate Intelligence Committee on a bipartisan basis recently backed up. If that's not enough, you can hear it straight from the source. We're talking about the Russian President Vladimir Putin, who specifically said in Helsinki at that joint news conference with the president that he wanted Donald Trump to beat Hillary in the election. Hillary Clinton. Listen to this.
President Putin, did you want President Trump to win the election, and did you direct any of your officials to help him do that?
Да, я хотел, чтобы он выиграл. Yes, I did. Yes, I did. Because he talked about bringing the U.S.-Russia relationship back to normal.
All right, Senator Mike Rounds is joining us right now. He's a Republican from South Dakota. He's a key member of the Senate Armed Services Committee. Senator, thanks so much for joining us.
Appreciate the opportunity, Wolf.
So what do you think of the president's claim this morning in that tweet that the Russians are going to be working very hard in the midterm elections in November to help Democrats get elected and make sure that Republicans like you, I don't know if you're even up for re-election this time, but make sure Republicans lose?
Well, I think what will happen is that they'll try to create chaos in the election if they can. That's what they were trying to do in 2016. They thought that Hillary would win. And when they saw an opportunity to help Mr. Trump, they took advantage of that. But what they really wanted to do was cause chaos. And I think in 2018, I think they'll try to do exactly the same thing again. It's what they're doing in Western Europe today. And I don't think that they're going to change until we actually have the ability to send a very powerful message that it's simply not acceptable and that there's a price to be paid.
Well, you're right. One of the goals of the Russians, according to the U.S. intelligence community, the Obama intelligence community, and the Trump intelligence community, is to sow discord, to create chaos in the American political system. But it didn't stop there. As well as the Senate Intelligence Committee, Republicans and Democrats, they also concluded that the Russians not only wanted to sow discord, but they also wanted to make sure that Hillary Clinton lost, and finally that Donald Trump won. That was their goal. Do you accept that that was the goal of the Russians, according to the U.S. intelligence community?
I think the most recent reports that I could discuss that have been unclassified would suggest that they were not happy with Secretary of State Clinton's activities and what they felt was her interjection in Mr. Putin's last, if you want to call it his last election. And he never forgot that. And I think that's a large part of it. I think there was a significant amount of animosity between Mr. Putin and the former Secretary of State. I think that played into the election process as well.
Yeah, clearly they didn't like Hillary Clinton. They didn't like the Obama administration. And as you heard Putin himself say, that's why he preferred and he worked to try to help Donald Trump win the election. Do you think there's